Good morning. My name is Addie Candide, and I am the Pacific Northwest Regional Director for American Farmland Trust. Welcome to our Women for the Land live stream interview. And joining me today is Sarah McClure. Sarah McClure is the co-owner of Walla Walla Organics, which is a certified organic farm in southwestern Washington near Walla Walla. She and her husband grow the only certified organic, genuine Walla Walla sweet onions, and they also grow organic vegetables for processing and dry legumes. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you.
For those of you who are new to AFT, we are a national nonprofit organization that exists to save the land that sustains us by protecting farmland, promoting sound farming practices, and keeping farmers on the land. And as part of our Women for the Land initiative, we are highlighting the stories of women in agriculture who inspire us across the Pacific Northwest. Sarah is one of those women, and we are really excited to have her here today to tell us more about her story. So I have some questions prepared today, but we'd also love to hear from the folks who are tuning in. So whichever platform you are watching on, please send us your questions for Sarah. So with that, heard enough from me, and Sarah, we love to hear from you. So could you start by introducing yourself and your farm? Tell us where you're located, what you produce, your scale, whatever you feel like you want folks to know.
We farm just west, about 17 miles west of Walla Walla, near the Oregon border. We are in a dryland area. With our acreage is all irrigated because our annual rainfall is 8 inches a year. And we have received this much of our spring rains for this year. So we're actually feeling more like it's July now than it is heading into May with the areas of the farm where we do not irrigate. My husband and I were late to the farming game. We're partners in John Deere dealership for almost 30 years in Walla Walla. And then we sold that and moved into farming. My husband always wanted to be a farmer, and he loves what he does. And we recently moved to the farm a year ago, and when we're really enjoying being out where our nearest neighbor is, half mile away. So we enjoy that. Originally, we were involved in a partnership that grew conventional Walla Walla sweet onions, and then they added organic. And when we split the partnership, we kept the organic part of the business, and then our partners kept the conventional. And through the years, we have looked for other crops to be profitable, to make the farm overall profitable. Sweet onions aren't enough to carry it. And we now do processing vegetables, which are spinach and pumpkins, butternut and butterkin pumpkins. And those are for processing. So they make them into a puree, and they've been able to put them in huge totes with no oxygen so they can use the puree over time. What we're hoping to hit this year is baby food with both kale, spinach, and the butternut, which is much more difficult to hit the parameters for that, but the revenue is also greater. And what we do with the onions are they're a 4-year rotation. So we grow the onions, and then in rotation we have the spinach, the butternut, and then the legumes. And the legumes really aren't very profitable at all, but they're really good for the soil. And a lot of what we're trying to do is, especially farming organically, the healthier your soil, the less weed pressure you have, the less disease pressure you have, the healthier your plants, the better the crops, and it ultimately, supposedly, all rolls to your bottom line. And that seems to be working this year. We also have about 112 acres that are in transition. That will be the last piece that we will transition to organic. And we have 45 acres that are conventional that we will probably roll into native grasses. We have some really steep hills on our property, and our water is getting to be a very coveted resource. and we have to manage our water very, very carefully. So what we've chosen to do is take those hills, which are not very productive ground, and put them all in native grasses so that we can water them when we have extra water, just to solidify those native grasses, but not have to take water from our other crops. Because if the spinach needs water, the spinach needs water, and it's a high value crop, and so that has to come first. So that's kind of in a nutshell, our farming operation.
Great. Can you talk about your role in the business specifically, and maybe how that's shifted or changed over time?
My role in the business, my husband and I both attended Montana State University, and he came to ski, and I was a native Montanan, and he studied agriculture, and I studied business accounting, and actually have a CPA. So that's the role that I held at the John Deere dealership, as well as into the farm, was the numbers person, the bean counter, so to speak. And so that's my role on the farm. Is I do all of anything that has to do with money is what I do. And then we talk about things pretty much, every morning we sit down and have coffee, and you talk about, well, what are we doing on the farm? And, what are we going to do, financially, where are we sitting? And right now we're talking about, do we need a new tractor? If we need a new tractor, which size tractor would be best? Because our farming is changing. We used to grow alfalfa seed and conventionally, and that you need bigger equipment for that, and you bigger sprayers, bigger tractors, bigger combines, and since we're moving more to the processing and cutting, not having conventional acres anymore, we don't need that big equipment. But it's a real change, because my husband has driven a combine every year since he was in high school, and so to not have a big John Deere combine on the farm is really a big change for him. Although with 112 acres of grain, I'm not, actually not even that. That was last year. This year we only have 45 acres. So that you can't really justify having your own combine for that. So our roles, I guess in some ways they would be considered traditional. I was raised on a farm in Northwest Montana, farm and ranch, and my mother did the same thing. My mother paid all the bills, and she was the one that fussed when she thought, my dad was spending too much money, and they were doing things they shouldn't. And my dad made all the decisions. But theirs was much more of a traditional farming role, where my mother was very much secondary, and my dad didn't really listen to her, to be honest. But I feel like our partnership is much more of a real partnership, and I consider myself a farmer. I remember decades ago, my aunt and uncle ranched in eastern Montana, and my aunt decided that on the tax return, she was going to list her profession as a farmer, because she was no longer a homemaker. She was a farmer, and they were partners. But that was a huge shift for them to, even on the tax return, to change that role from their traditional wife, mother, homemaker to actually being a farming partner. And that's a change in my generation that's even much more noticeable in the generations that are following.
Well, thanks for that, and I'm really glad that you talked a little bit about sort of the ways in which your role might be seen as traditional or not. And of course, this is a Women for the Land event, and so we are really interested in your lens as a woman working in agriculture. And I'd love to hear a little bit about your experience being a woman working in agriculture, working for a John Deere dealership, running the business end of things for the sort of size and scale of farm that you're involved in, and what that's been like, and maybe how it's changed over time.
For me, it's changed over time. What we really enjoy is Dan and I own our farm completely. We are 50% equal owners. We have no other partners. We have no one else, telling us what to do or telling us what we can't do, kind of. So it's been very gratifying to actually be able to take a farm and start from ground zero. We started farming full-time in 2011. So we're 10 years in as full-time farmers. And there are barriers to entry, even for people our age who were coming into this kind of as a second career. It took a lot of time for us to get the everything we needed, to get the right kind of equipment, to get irrigation pipe or, enough tractors or even a tractor. And we just recently built a shop. And before that, we were leasing a shop and about 5-6 miles away. And our equipment wouldn't fit in it. So in the winter, the doors would be open and we'd have this huge tarp that would come out over the top, over the equipment, so we could work on it in the winter. And we had to go across the bridge and around to get to it. It was extremely inconvenient, but the ground we rent half of our ground and we own half of our ground. There wasn't anything on there that we could use. And I think that was surprising to us, the learning curve that we had to actually find a business plan and a business model that worked for us, where we had a lot of years where we were not making money. And it took us a long time to find the other legs of our stool, is kind of how we talked about it. You need, especially in an ag business, you need different legs for your stool. And we had the sweet onion leg, and we tried catnip, we tried peppermint, we tried potatoes, we tried all kinds of other things. And we had the alfalfa seed leg for years. So we had the organic onions, the conventional alfalfa seed, and then we were searching for that other component. And the reason, that's a very interesting business model to be sort of organic and conventional starting out, but it was the only thing that would work for us, because while we have 600 acres, that's really small for the area where we farm. So we had to find some mix that would allow us to be profitable within that acreage limit and with the water that we have, because there are times of the year where we just don't have enough water. So some years we would raise plants. I can't think of the name of it right now, but we would raise plants that you only had to water them once, and then you let them grow and you harvested them, because then we had that much extra water to put on the alfalfa seed or some of our other crops. So it's been really challenging to kind of make that transition into full-time farmers from financially and management, and actually finding labor has been hard, but it's been rewarding, and we've learned a lot. But what's interesting too is when you talk to my husband and me too, when we were at the John Deere dealership and you're sitting across the desk from farmers and you're trying to sell them equipment, and we're trying to have a relationship as a supplier of farmers. It always looks easy. The grass always looks good. You're like, oh, I want to do that. That just looks really like a fun thing to do. And then when you get on the other side of that desk, you're like, oh man, there are challenges I hadn't really thought of. And that's been kind of fun. But it's been a blessing for us because we've been able to do that. We really enjoyed our years in the John Deere dealership, and we're really enjoying these years as full-time farmers. And then now we're starting to kind of look like, what's our exit strategy? What's our next chapter? Because it's a lot of hard work.
Absolutely. And I want to come back to that next chapter topic. But first, I wanted to ask a follow-up, which is, you talk about sort of the grass being greener on the other side. What's one of the things that has surprised or challenged you the most working on the farming side that you didn't expect when you made that transition into full-time farming?
The first thing that pops into my mind is we moved to the farm a year ago, and we're literally living in an apartment in the top of our shop, and it's very small, and the office is downstairs, and there is dust everywhere. I still don't have kitchen cabinets. The bathroom's not finished. But we had to move our son. Our son moved into our house in town, and they were having a baby. So we had to move. Well, we moved right before we started our field work last spring. So we really didn't have the opportunity to get there's always something that's more important than getting kitchen cabinets. So, and we're still there. But one of the things that surprised me was I grew up on a farm in Montana, and I remember growing up to the sounds of impact sprinklers, and those are the irrigation pipes that and they go around like this, and there's a sound every time they hit, and when that water goes. And what I really noticed when I moved to the farm was I heard that sound again of impact sprinklers when you wake up in the morning or you go to sleep at night. And I hadn't realized how much I missed actually living out on the farm. And I enjoy it much more than I thought I would. I mean, it's 17 miles to town, which is a challenge. But during the pandemic, I mean, we were sort of out here in our own little island, and we just worked like we work. But that was surprising as how much I really both of us really enjoy being on the farm. Mm-hmm. That may be exactly what you were thinking of, but that was the thing that just really just instantly popped into my mind.
Yeah, well, and I love that sort of the way that just the sort of the sights and sounds and smells of being on the land can be such a powerful part of the experience and the connection to the work, right? So I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about your farming philosophy. You've mentioned that the operation is predominantly organic. You've got some acreage that's still conventional. Can you talk about your farming philosophy, why growing organically is important to you, and sort of maybe how your approach or the decisions to shift toward organic have evolved over time?
It's interesting when you go to organic farm meetings. There's kind of two groups of people. There are the people that grow organic and got into organic because it's an extreme passion of theirs, and they're just, I mean, organic is almost like a religion, kind of. And then there are the people that got into organic from a business perspective, and they approach it from a business perspective. And that's why we got into organic. Back to what I said before, we were trying to find a business model that worked with the acreage and the constraints that we had, where we could actually make money. And organic was where we saw the growth potential. And so it was originally a business decision. But as we've been farming organically, the farm's been certified organic since 2003, and we started in 2001 with the partners, and then we went into full-time farming without any partners in 2011. And so, but over years we've gone to lots of organic meetings. And you start kind of eating a little bit organic food, and we pull the spinach out of the field, and you start realizing that that there's something to it. And so over time, it's become less of a business decision and more of a lifestyle and more of a lifestyle decision. My new thing is organic bananas. I bought organic bananas like couple months ago for the first time. And, oh my gosh, they are delicious. It's my new thing. I'm only going to buy organic bananas now. But I do find in the summer we eat organic food, and I buy organic food. When I go to the grocery store, I'm still a little hit and miss, but it's changed. It actually has changed the way we approach and the way we live our lives. Not drastically, but it's the little things. We're willing to try things and look at things. And our farming philosophy, we went to an acres conference in Louisville about 2.5 years ago, and we listened to a speaker there, And that's what really kind of got us into regenerative farming. And what he said really resonates. And I think it's kind of what we're, and it makes sense. And I think actually all farming is kind of heading this way, but I think it kind of started there where if you have healthy soil, you have a healthy plant. If you have a healthy plant, you have healthy food. If you have healthy food, you have healthy people. And it kind of all works together with nature. But it starts with healthy soil and getting the nutrient-rich plant, nutrient-rich produce, and then and then people are healthier because they're eating healthier food. And I think that's kind of what we're trying to do now is get our soil real healthy. And that's not something that happens immediately. It's kind of a long-term goal. But that's where we're heading now is doing things to really trying to get our soil healthy, because plants that are really healthy, growing in healthy soil, are more disease resistant, and weeds actually have a harder time taking hold. And weeds are a constant, never-ending challenge. And so anything we can do to keep them growing somewhere else and not in our field, it is a good thing.
Right. I want to pause here and just remind folks who are tuning in that we encourage you to post your questions for Sarah. We'd love to hear from you. And Sarah, it's interesting to hear you talk about sort of being inspired about regenerative agriculture and this sort of long-term project to build healthy soil on your farm. I'm wondering if you can tell us about specific practices or strategies that you are using to do that work of building soil and growing healthy plants.
There are a lot of different things that we're doing. We try and grow a lot of cover crops. So a part of regenerative farming is having something on your soil. The wind blows a lot in Tushy, and if you have bare ground and it's dry, then the soil that you've done all this work to get healthy is blowing over into your neighbor's field. And so we try and do cover crops. That's been a little challenging. We've tried a couple of times to grow things in the summer, and we just didn't have enough water, so we can't get them to where we want them to be so we can turn them back in the soil. So I'm not sure we're going to, do a lot of cover cropping in the full heat of the summer. But we irrigate as long as we possibly can. Unless if there's snow on the ground, we don't irrigate, or if it's too cold that the water freezes. But other than that, we irrigate as long as possible, and we bank our water. So you irrigate in November, December, January, February, as early as you can. So we have that water down low for the plants, and so that's part of it. So we do that with the watering, and then in the cover cropping is important. We also put microbes into our soil through the drip tape, because we do 3 different kinds of irrigating. We do irrigating with pivot, which is a center pivot irrigation where it goes around in circles, and we use drip tape, which sometimes we put the drip tape in when we plant the plants, and so it's like a 1-year drip tape. And then we also have drip tape that we call subsurface drip, which is planted like 12 to 18 inches below the ground, and we farm on top of it, and we leave that in the ground. The gophers, however, like to chew holes in that. So we have the first one we put in, we're going to have to tear out because the gophers have just gone to town. So through the irrigation system, the drip tape, we can put liquid fertilizer stuff. And so we have microbes, and he's almost like a chemist out there with these concoctions of all these different things, and you have to stir them and spin them and trying to dissolve them so that then they can get into the soil. And a lot of what they're doing is they will go in and they release the elements and the things that are already in the soil so that the plants can get to them and access them. And that's a lot of what we're doing now. The cover crops, and the legumes. And what you do is you want to raise crops where the roots go down deep. So it churns up your soil so it's nice and soft, and the plants can get to it and the microbes can get into it, and it's all healthy, and the water can sit in it. So there was something else I was going to say with that, but I can't remember what it is. But so we do those two things. Oh, and the animals. We bring sheep. We have sheep that come graze. That's what I forgot. They're actually coming back next week. And we have some people we work with that raise grass-fed sheep, and they have beef and chickens too. But they bring the sheep to us after they've lambed, and so we get to watch the babies grow up. And one year we weren't able to harvest our butternut and buttercream squash because of problems with the processing plant, and then the frost hit, and they started to decay in the field. And so they brought their sheep in, and they ate 50 acres worth of butternut squash. And apparently the seeds in squash are really, really healthy for breeding ewes. So they were incredibly healthy. And I think all of their ewes had triplets, except for like 2. And they had all these babies and all these ewes and all these healthy sheep because they got to eat our butternut squash, which made us feel better, because you go to all the work to grow that squash and then you watch it just decay in the field. That's really depressing. Mm-hmm. But I know what I wanted to say. The sheep, what makes it good for them to graze on the cover crops is when they graze down on a grass, the grass will go, oh my gosh, I don't have enough green, and the roots will then go even deeper. So it really helps with the soil. And when they pee and they poop, that really helps the soil too. And the tromping around, this kind of the stirring up in the soil, which seems kind of funny, but it really helps a lot to have animals in the field. And we're lucky they're not our animals. So they come every day, check the water, check the fences. They have dogs, these wonderful dogs that can herd them and bring them around. But it's very fun for us to have them and be able to watch them. And it's good for them because they can have extend their grazing and move animals around and be healthier for them as well. So it is win-win.
Mm-hmm. That sounds like an ideal partnership in a lot of ways. You've mentioned a little bit about the lack of rain that you've experienced so far this year. We're living and farming in an increasingly unpredictable climate. And I'm wondering if you can talk more about the ways that that's impacting the farm operation and the decision making you're doing, and if there are specific concerns that you have as you look toward the years ahead.
One of our issues now, in the past and in the future, it's always going to be water, and I think there's and you can see it throughout all this whole area. Is people have always been respectful and careful with their water, but I think that's getting more and more prevalent. And some of it is labor. Whether we used to have everything out in this area was hand lines, where you had people move pipe every 6 hours or 12 hours or 24 hours. And we just don't have access to labor anymore to do that. And with the wind, some of those impact sprinklers and that type of irrigating isn't as efficient, unless the wind blows the same way all the time, because then you can plan for that. But then you end up with a skip the day the wind didn't blow. One of the things we're doing is we just put on some drip tubes, some orange like hoses onto our pivot, and you have a hose that drops down so it goes to the ground, and then attached to that is a hose with holes in it that's at different lengths depending on where you are on the circle. So next to the center of the pivot, the tube with the water is very, very short. And out at the end, it's like, I don't know, 10, 20 feet long. And so it looks really funny. It looks like all these spaghetti noodles are hanging off the end of our pivot. But that you drag those and they will go even over butternut squash and really bunchy plants. Supposedly they will drag and water, and then we won't get the evaporation, and the water will go right down next to the roots. So that's one of the things we're doing to try and treasure our water. And the drip irrigation also is very is good on a lot of levels, because we can put the nutrients in and we can water specifically where we need the water. So in our we have tire tracks where we have the drip irrigation under the ground. We use our GPS, so you always drive the tractor on the same rows. And so other than harvest, where you've got machinery everywhere, we are not driving over the soil or over where that drip tape actually is, because you don't want the soil to be compacted. Mm-hmm. And that, because that's a way you get water. So we're not watering in those tire tracks. We're only watering where the plants are. So we're using our water more judiciously, which is really nice in an organic field as well, because if we're not watering in those wheel tracks, there aren't weeds growing in those tracks because they don't have water either. So that's kind of a win-win. And we see that throughout the valley where people are using their water more carefully and trying to make good use of each drop. And that's and we think that's important and a good thing. And I think there will be more changes for that. We traveled to Israel a couple years ago with the ag forestry leadership group, and that was one of the really interesting things that we viewed were different irrigation, because Israel is top of their field in utilizing water and land and growing crops with the least amount of water. And it was fascinating to see some of the things that they're doing, and some of the nozzles and some of the things that they were using were the same ones that we had. So we felt like we're onto something. But I think water is very important. And what the other thing we see is there's and farming with rotation and with the land health, soil health, and kind of nature in mind, there's more of that throughout all of agriculture. I mean, every farm magazine you pick up has an article on cover cropping, and why to do it, who's doing it, how to do it, and that wasn't the case 10 years ago. But cover cropping and some of these other farming practices that used to be kind of out there and different are becoming not necessarily more mainstream, but people are talking about them, thinking about them, and starting to do them, and starting to think about soil health, begatting plant health, and that's one of the things I wanted to mention is there's a lot of synergy between all the different facets of agriculture, whether you're a 1 acre farm, or whether you're 600 acres like us, or whether you're 10,000 acres. We all have the same goals. The land is where we make our living. The land is what provides for us and for those that we're trying to feed. So we want to care for that land, and we want to care for what's around that land. It was, we even are okay with a deer coming in, although they're not supposed to poop in the organic field. But it's, we're all stewards of the land. And I think every farmer takes that seriously. And because farming is such a small part of our nation's industries, we need to find ways where we can all kind of work together to educate people on where food comes from and how important it is and why healthy food is better. And, buying something that you can take home and put in your microwave and eat in 50 seconds may not be the healthiest, the healthiest option. And there's more that unites us, than divides us when it comes to healthy food and trying to feed the world. And it's interesting because when I grew up, and I've seen this statistically, when I was a kid, every person in America was 1 or 2 generations away from the farm. So everyone knew an aunt or an uncle or a grandma that grew up on the farm, that was tied to the land, that had tried to make a living or tried to feed their family from what they grew. And now, my kids' generation and my granddaughter's generation, they don't even kids who grew up in Walla Walla, they don't have that same connection to the land where they understand where food comes from. And it's and I think that's important. And that's been one of the blessings of the pandemic, where it was like everybody was growing vegetables in their backyard. And my son and all, it seems like his generation, they're all wanting food forests and chickens and trying to have their own eggs, and they're realizing first of all, how good that food can taste, but also how much work it is and how hard it is to deal with the surpluses. My son has all these chickens and ducks, and he's getting 12 eggs a day. They're just inundated with eggs. But you got to figure that out. But then in the winter, you don't have any eggs. So I think there's, there are some blessings with these challenges that we have in life.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that. And I just really appreciate all of the passion that you have that really comes through when you talk about your care for the land and your stewardship for the land. I wanted to, well, first of all, I'll just remind folks who are watching, please do send your questions for Sarah. And I wanted to circle back, Sarah. You were saying that sort of no matter what scale or size someone is farming on, you have more in common than sets you apart. And you also mentioned that the ideas of sort of cover cropping and stewardship of the soil are becoming much more prevalent. What do you see as some of the primary challenges or barriers that are still preventing farmers from implementing things like cover cropping or the soil health practices that you've been able to incorporate? What's making it hard for folks to make that switch?
I think a lot of it is time and money. If you are a dryland farmer, we're lucky we have water. Well, most of the year we have water. So if we grow a cover crop, we can put water on that crop and grow it, and then turn it back in the soil to make the soil healthier. If you're a dryland farmer out toward the Columbia River or even up toward the mountains, you don't have that. You don't necessarily have that extra water when you have the time to grow a cover crop. So there are a lot of challenges for a lot of people in dryland ground. If you plant a cover crop, you lose a season. So you lose your cash crop, and that's really hard for a farm to absorb, a full season of not getting a cash crop, especially when you may not see that, that the next year you may have maybe you'll have a small increase, but building your soil and having really healthy soil, it's not a one and done thing, and it doesn't automatically happen in 1 year. This is something that you evolve over time. And a lot of the things that we're doing now, hopefully our farm will stay organic, for many years, but a lot of what we're doing now, you won't really reap those benefits for many years. So it's a long-term game, and a lot of people, and actually the kind of the American mentality, it's not a long-term game. I mean, even a long-term stock investment is 3 years or 5 years. Well, that's not a very long time. So I think it's money and time makes a big difference. And I think that, and the proof is in the pudding. I think as more people find ways to do some of these things, and people can see the differences and they can see the increase in their bottom line, then I think that, and farming, well, and actually any business. I mean, there's, and even the John Deere dealership, our margins were very, very tiny. So it was hard. You needed to be nimble and you needed to make changes to react to, new conventions and new recommendations, but you have to be very careful what you can do because you have to be able to afford it, and not everything's going to work. So you've got to be, you got to be a gambler. So my dad always loved the Kenny Rogers song, "The Gambler." He said, "That's farming. And know when to hold them and know when to fold them," and he would talk about that all the time. And so but in order to be successful in farming, I think you have to be innovative. You have to be looking toward changes, changing market, changing farming practices. There's a lot of hats you have to wear, especially in a farm our size, and that's hard, and it takes. So I think we need time for people to be willing to try these things and be able to make that financial commitment, because it's really hard to make money farming, and so sometimes it's really hard to jump and make that step, or to buy that new tractor, or to buy the drip tubes for your irrigation system, the orange spaghetti thing. But
right.
There are a lot of challenges.
Yeah. Well, and sort of this idea of managed risk, and knowing when to take the risk and when not to take the risk. It's so hard. So you've mentioned attending an acres conference. You mentioned the ag forestry program that you participated in. How have you navigated or leveraged the sort of agricultural support system to find the resources that you need to be successful?
One of the things that we do is there are a lot of, Walla Walla is a very diverse agricultural area. We have a lot of different crops that are grown here. We have a lot of different types of farming. There's, when you start at the Columbia River, it's about 45 miles. And I think every 10 miles, there's one more inch of water. So like in town, they get way more rain per year than we do. So that allows for the area to have a lot more diverse agriculture, because the ecosystem is very different in our valley. And some of that, I think, has made it easier well, maybe not easier, but more prevalent for women to come back to farm. We have quite a few young women in our local Touchy area that have come back to farm with their families. And there's, one of my friends that farms up out of Waitsburg is a woman. And so and the young people are coming back to the farms here, not just women, but I'm excited about the women coming back. And so there's opportunity here. And I think there are women that are very active in the small farms, the horse-powered farms, the CSAs, the farm stand gardens. There's a lot of women in agriculture locally, and I think we find ways to support each other and be together in supporting each other. It's not a technical mentoring situation, but that's kind of what it is. And I think that's really important, is for people in agriculture to support each other, the younger generations and older generations, but also for women to do that, because that's a big shift since I was coming of age. Women were not encouraged to come back to the farm. The equipment was much harder. There was a lot more physical, hard labor that was tough for women to do, where now the equipment and GPS makes that easier. And there's a lot of it that's more mental and planning and more working with your business model where it's not as much digging in the dirt as it used to be. So I think that has been helpful. And I think it's also a way that I can now sort of give back to the younger generation is to try and do that. What we got a lot of help and advice from Farm Credit when we were first getting into farming, and actually was our loan advisor that got me involved in ag forestry and a lot of the ag programs that I have been involved in. And that's kind of my role on the farm is I do the marketing stuff with there's some of our organic things that we sell here locally. And I do that and more of kind of the outreach stuff. So
I could interject. Can I interject? We have a question from one of our viewers asking, what market channels have been best for you? So sort of while you're in that headspace, can you talk a little bit about where you're doing your marketing?
We the vegetables, the spinach, the squash, and then we grow some zucchini, kale. Those are for processing. So those go to a processing plant. We work with 2 different processors, and so we don't direct market any of that. The Walla Walla sweet onions, we work with a marketing group, and we go to a packing shed, and a marketing group sells them, and they're sold. Some of them go into some of the big grocery stores, and then some of them are sold into the specifically organic stores. We are lucky, hopefully, that because we are the only organic, genuine Walla Walla sweet onions in the world, we should have a limited product. So we should be able to sell everything we have, hopefully at a profit. Most of our onions, because we don't have a huge acreage, are in the kind of Pacific Northwest area. Although one year we did have Walla Walla sweet onions in Whole Foods in Atlanta, Georgia. Wow. And I wanted to fly to Atlanta, Georgia and take a picture of a Walla Walla sweet onion outside the Atlanta, Georgia, Vidalia Kingdom. But yeah, I didn't do that. So, but I do feel like it's important to have the Walla Walla sweet onions available locally. And when they go through the marketing group, that's more difficult than you would think, because they get sold to a distribution center, and then it depends on if the buyer or if the local produce buyer requests them. So we have made the effort to have the onions locally, and I will do that. And then some of the beans that we sell, I bag in little 1-pound bags to just sell locally too. And it's not really necessarily as a profit center. It's more to be supportive of the other farm stands and the other people in the area, and to have our food available here. The beans, we usually sell those to people from out of the area. So there isn't really a lot of stuff that we sell into the local arena that we actually direct market. I think if I was younger, that might be that could be a real growth area. But when we're looking at kind of ways to simplify and slow down to do more on farm with direct marketing, it's a good idea, but just maybe not for me. Mm-hmm. The next generation, we need to get some young blood in here that wants to take that and really run with it. There's opportunity there, but we don't have the mind share to really go into that.
Well, that's a great segue. I mean, I have dozens more questions for you, and I know that our viewers do too, but we're kind of coming up on the end of our time. And so I'd love to sort of just build on what you were saying and invite you to talk a little bit about something you referenced earlier, which is looking toward the next phase and getting that new blood onto the farm. What does that process look like for you? How are you envisioning that transition happening?
It's kind of funny because we talk about it. I mean, we've been farming for 10 years. We really wish we were 30 and just starting out rather than, on the backside, far down the backside of 30. And it depends on the day. Some days we're really excited about it and we don't want to change anything. We want to do this, well into the future. And then there are other days where you're like, okay, I'm tired. I've worked really hard. I don't want to do this anymore. And the pump's down or something like that. But I do have my great uncle and aunt in north central Montana are like 93 and 95, and they're still farming. Granted, their daughters have come home and helped them, and their grandson spends a lot of his time there. But it's so it depends on if you look at them as the example or our neighbors that have already retired and are, on a sailboat in Mexico or something. We've reached, hopefully, we're about maybe to reach the point where we feel like we do have a going concern business, that if we did decide we wanted to transition out, we would have something that we could bring someone else in that might want to buy it or might want to take it over, that we could transition to. Of course, that's hard to do because you have to be able to let go. We're still, we don't want to, we have 3 sons. We don't want to pressure any of them to come back to the farm, but that option is open if they would choose to do that. The way we have presented it to them is if they want to come back to the farm, they need to bring something of value. So they need to have ideas, they need to have thought about it and figure out where they're going to add value and where they're going to help take the farm to the next step. Because one of the things with a farm our size is we have to be nimble, we have to be constantly changing. We're too big to be small, and we're too small to be big. And some of the innovations that people do to make farms less labor intensive and more efficient, we aren't big enough to do or to do well. And so it's going to be a constant challenge to remain profitable and remain the size we are. And so that makes transitioning maybe more of a challenge, but a lot of it is it's hard to let go. So while we are committed to trying to simplify and actually having a retirement someday, how and when that's going to happen is really kind of changes from day to day, season to season. So it's that we are fully and completely on the fence with how we are going to transition out of our current career into something else.
Well, thanks for being willing to share. I know it's not an easy process, and I'm grateful for you being willing to sort of share your thoughts about it. We're coming to the end of our time, and I'm just curious, do you have any sort of final thoughts or advice you'd like to share for those folks out there who might be looking to you as an example or an inspiration?
I think I was thinking about this, and I think Dan and I feel very blessed that we have been able to work in agriculture. I worked in public accounting when I first got out of college. And it was really hard because it was 8 to 5. I had to track my time with every 6 minutes. It was really structured, and when you worked, when you didn't work, when you had your time off, and there's something to be said about working on the land. The hours are long, and sometimes you don't know what are going to be long days or short days, but you control your own destiny. And sometimes that's when things are going well and you're making money, that's a really wonderful thing. when everything's going south and everything's broken down and nothing has any water, you wonder, what were you thinking? But I think there's a lot of promise and hope in agriculture and a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of mouths to feed, and there are a lot of people that need, want, and deserve healthy food, and we can do that. And I think that's really exciting. And I think people should consider agriculture as a career and a lifestyle. I mean, our new routine is we get up at like 5 o'clock in the morning and we go walk around the farm. We check the onions, or you check the spinach, or you wander around and look at the pumps, and then you work all day, and then we end the night in. We have a hot tub. We end the night in the hot tub watching the sunset to the west and watching the moon rise to the east. How many people could do that?
Sounds like a pretty amazing life. Sarah, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your stories. And for those of you who are watching today, the recording of this interview will continue to be available at the same links that we shared. So please take the opportunity to share with folks who you might be think might be interested. Sarah, once again, thank you, and best of luck this season.
All right, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you.